Putin mocked the West after issuing a sinister warning just a day earlier, taunting Western leaders while projecting confidence that Moscow's strategic posture remains unbowed even as tensions and rhetoric continue to escalate. Are American sanctions no longer carrying the same degree of fear they once did, as target states and third-party actors have developed greater resilience and circumvention tools, reducing the immediate coercive impact of financial penalties compared with past decades? Meanwhile, Moscow is making operational headway into Ukrainian territory, with advances on multiple axes that critics say are eroding Kyiv's defensive depth and reshaping the frontline even as international efforts to stem the fighting and reinforce Ukraine's position continue. Russia's President, Vladimir Putin, spoke at length about the impact of Western sanctions on the country's domestic aircraft production, framing his remarks as a defense of national industry while emphasizing how Moscow has adapted supply chains and industrial policy to withstand external pressure. Putin asserted that Russia was capable of fully substituting imported components and technologies if necessary, a claim reported by RT that he used to argue Moscow had achieved strategic industrial self-reliance in key defense and civil sectors. He went on to say that, in certain areas, Russian performance had even exceeded Western indicators, citing improvements in production efficiency and technological output as evidence that sanctions had spurred a push for domestic innovation rather than causing debilitating setbacks. Beyond those claims, Putin stated that Russia now counts among the top 4 countries worldwide producing aircraft engines, an assertion meant to highlight the Kremlin's narrative of industrial recovery and competitive defense capability on the global stage. He also praised a new generation of young engineers, saying the sector has a bright future and crediting educational reforms and targeted investment for cultivating the talent needed to sustain long-term technological progress.
The sanctions really changed the situation for Russia. Russia was forced, but has been able to fully substitute everything it needed and it once imported. And in certain areas, not only did we create similar solutions, but in many ways and in many cases, we exceeded the Western indicators and made something better, and this is what I learned from test pilots who fly these planes. What is gratifying is that there are young teams of engineers and constructors who work on this project with an average age in these engineering teams between 32 and 35 years. This is something very positive, and this means that our aircraft manufacturing sector has a bright future. In addition to this, Russia is a top 4 country in the world in terms of making aircraft engines on its own. This is also a very positive indicator. And later in my remarks, I will say that we need to move forward at a quicker pace and be more responsive. But what we have already achieved is already quite positive. And I've just talked to a test pilot right now.
Meanwhile, analysts warn that Moscow's latest offensive in Ukraine could alter the course of the war, with recent territorial gains and operational momentum carrying the potential to reshape frontlines and political calculations unless Kyiv and its partners can effectively shore up defenses. Ukraine may be losing more territory as Russia presses its latest offensive, with recent movements on the ground suggesting Kyiv's defensive depth is being tested and some frontline positions are at heightened risk of falling under sustained pressure. The Russian Defense Ministry reported a concentrated offensive push in the Konstantinovka area, describing intensified combined arms operations meant to break through Ukrainian defenses and secure key terrain that could open routes deeper into Donbass. Konstantinovka forms part of Ukraine's so-called fortress belt in the Donbass region, a line of fortified positions and logistical nodes that Ukrainian commanders have relied on to blunt previous Russian advances and protect strategic population centers. The Donbass matters because it represents Ukraine's industrial heartland, with heavy industry, infrastructure, and economic assets that have long underpinned the country's manufacturing base and therefore carry significant strategic and symbolic importance. Beyond its economic value, Donbass serves as a critical military operational corridor linking Russia to occupied Crimea, a geography that Moscow seeks to control to secure supply lines, enable maneuver, and consolidate territorial gains across southern Ukraine. For Moscow, Donbass also functions as an ideological centerpiece tied to broader ambitions of dominating Ukraine, a narrative Kremlin propagandists use to justify territorial claims while framing the campaign as reclaiming historically and culturally contested lands. Russian sources claimed they had destroyed scattered Ukrainian groups during recent fighting, a characterization reported by Kiev Independent that Moscow uses to portray tactical successes while Kiev disputes and often frames such claims as part of information warfare. Konstantinovka is widely regarded as the main barrier to Moscow's ambitions of conquering the wider Donbass area, a pivotal node whose fall would materially ease Russian operational pathways and complicate Ukraine's ability to defend adjacent sectors. Moscow asserted that Ukrainian forces suffered the loss of around 90 troops along with 22 vehicles and associated artillery assets, figures that come from Russian reports and which Ukrainian authorities typically contest or do not corroborate publicly. The Russian Ministry of Defense listed the destruction of 29 ground robotic systems and 22 unmanned aerial vehicle command posts, citing these as evidence of degraded Ukrainian capabilities even as independent verification of such battlefield claims remains difficult. The offensive reportedly concentrated on the Kramatorsk agglomeration's road network as a strategic axis, with forces seeking to interdict movement, sever supply lines and isolate key urban centers to shape subsequent operations. Ukraine faces pressing manpower shortages and logistic strains in an environment heavily saturated by drones, a combination that complicates resupply, force rotation and the maintenance of layered defenses under constant aerial surveillance and strike threat. Since 2014, Konstantinovka has served as a forward hub for Ukraine's war effort, hosting staging areas, logistics, and command nodes that have made it strategically valuable both for defense and as a springboard for counter-operations. Russian forces have been exploiting bouts of bad weather and wide gaps between Ukrainian positions to advance, taking tactical advantage of visibility and positioning shortcomings while probing for seams to expand their foothold on the battlefield.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.